Most men never realized that the first teacher they had about desire was not a father, not an elder, not a tradition, but a glowing screen that spoke without consequence and trained without wisdom. And if you have ever felt a quiet conflict between what your body reacts to and what your mind knows is hollow, this moment's not accidental. Because somewhere inside you there is an awareness that something shaped your instincts before you had the strength to question it. And staying here means you are ready to see what that education actually gave you, and what it quietly took away, not through shame or accusation, but through clarity, discipline, and the reclaiming of self-command that belongs to men who choose to govern themselves, rather than be governed by impulse. Pornography did not enter male life as entertainment alone. It entered as instruction, subtle at first, repetitive over time, shaping expectations before experience, conditioning arousal before meaning, and teaching the nervous system to respond to images divorced from effort, connection, responsibility, or consequence. And when a boy or young man encounters sexuality through performance, rather than participation, his body learns speed without presence, consumption without earning, release without direction, and this becomes a false education because it trains reaction rather than mastery. And over time, the nervous system stops asking whether something is meaningful, and only asks whether it is stimulating. Which is why many men later feel strangely empty, even when desire is satisfied, because the satisfaction was trained without depth, without struggle, without intention. In older masculine traditions, sexuality was not treated as something to be indulged or suppressed blindly. It was treated as power, raw and volatile, the same way fire was treated by builders, warriors, and monks. Respected because it could warm or destroy depending on how it was handled. And young men were not taught to follow every surge of desire. They were taught to contain it, refine it, and channel it into strength, leadership, craftsmanship, prayer, battle readiness, and long-term purpose. But pornography bypasses that entire training process. It hands the nervous system a shortcut and calls it freedom, when in reality it weakens the muscles of restraint and replaces discipline with dependency. Over time, this false education reshapes how a man relates to himself, because when arousal is constantly triggered externally, the internal sense of command erodes. Desire begins to feel like something that happens to him rather than something he directs. And this is where many men begin to feel fragmented, focused in ambition but scattered in impulse, disciplined in work but undisciplined in private, strong in appearance but quietly fatigued in spirit. And the cost is not only sexual, it bleeds into motivation, confidence, emotional regulation, and the ability to sit with tension without escaping it, because the nervous system has been trained to seek relief rather than growth. Pornography also distorts the meaning of intimacy by separating pleasure from presence, teaching the body to respond without the risk of rejection, the effort of pursuit, or the patience required to build trust. And while this may seem harmless on the surface, it subtly trains avoidance, because real connection demands vulnerability, pacing, emotional awareness, and the ability to stay grounded when outcomes are uncertain. And a man trained on instant stimulation often feels restless or dissatisfied when faced with the slower rhythms of real life, not because real intimacy lacks depth, but because his nervous system has been conditioned to expect intensity without investment. Semen retention, when understood correctly, is not about fear of pleasure or rejection of sexuality. It is about retraining the nervous system to respond to intention rather than impulse. It is discipline in the same way a warrior disciplines his breath, a monk disciplines his focus, or a builder disciplines his hands. And when a man learns to hold sexual energy without immediately discharging it, he is not denying himself. He is strengthening his capacity to choose. And choice is the foundation of masculine authority, because a man who cannot pause cannot lead himself. And a man who cannot lead himself will always feel subtly led by something else. As retention becomes training rather than struggle, awareness sharpens, impulses slow, and desire becomes something that can be observed, redirected, or expressed consciously, rather than compulsively. And this is where the false education begins to unravel. Because the body starts to relearn that arousal does not require immediate resolution, tension does not require escape, and energy does not need to leak in order to move. And this retraining restores something ancient in the masculine psyche, the ability to sit with power without being consumed by it, to feel desire without being ruled by it, to remain present without needing constant stimulation. Men throughout history who were entrusted with responsibility understood this instinctively. Kings who practiced restraint to maintain clarity. Warriors who conserved energy for battle rather than wasted in distraction. Monks who refined desire into devotion. Builders who channeled bodily strength into creation rather than indulgence. None of them were weak men. They were disciplined men. And their discipline was not repression. It was direction. And the modern man who reclaims this principle is not moving backward. He is correcting a distortion that never served him in the first place. Reclaiming masculine self-command begins with seeing pornography not as a moral failing but as a faulty instructor. One that taught the nervous system speed without substance and appetite without wisdom. And once this is seen clearly, the work becomes practical rather than emotional, slowing down responses, limiting exposure, rebuilding patience, strengthening focus, and treating sexual energy as something valuable rather than disposable. Because what a man repeatedly gives away without intention is what he eventually feels lacking, and what he learns to hold with discipline becomes the foundation of confidence, presence, and authority. This is not about perfection. It is about alignment, aligning desire with purpose, aligning energy with intention, aligning action with values that extend beyond the moment. And as this alignment strengthens, the false education loses its grip, because a disciplined nervous system no longer seeks constant novelty. It seeks depth, and a man rooted in depth does not need excess to feel alive. He carries his own gravity, his own center, his own command, and that is where real masculine freedom begins.